Welcome to part 4 of my Best of Next Fest October 23 edition. It's time for another day, and that means even more indie game demos worth your time. We are starting things off with Foundry. This is a factorial logistics style game with kind of our main hook being the options to play in multiplayer, and the entire game is built on voxels. But stop me if you've heard this one before. We have come to a procedurally generated world in order to build factories and do all that good logistics stuff. The game is played entirely in 3D, as you can see, but it does present a few issues with it. You see, while you're building in first person, you're not able to give the full top-down, kind of like going into builder mode view that a lot of games have done. And I definitely had some issues with organizing and setting up my various assembly lines in production. As another point, unlike some of the other games we played, you're required to lay down foundational blocks in order to actually build things on top of, which adds another layer of the early game slowdown. That is something that we don't want to see in these games. You want to get past that as quickly as possible. There is definitely something here, I would say, if you are looking for yet another logistics style game, but the main issues is going to be how this game is going to stand apart from the Factorios, Dyson Spheres, Satisfactories, and so on. So, with that said, if you are looking for another take, I would at least check out the demo to this one, but it does have a long road to, assemble before it's going to be able to play with the big boys. We now turn to Ocelot Sunrise. This is a bullet heaven and is the only one to date that actually starts with cutscenes and kind of comic book art style, which makes it the most story-driven one we've played yet. But you are trapped on alien worlds, and you must use all the weapons, artifacts, and abilities you can get in order to survive until you are rescued. So the game itself, again, as you can tell by the footage, plays a lot like the other bullet heavens we've checked out. The kind of unique factor here is that certain weapons have combo potentials, as in, if you do a specific move when the item or weapon is active, it will have a secondary effect, such as dashing over a mine to have it do more AoE damage. As you play, of course, you'll get random upgrades for your weapons, more weapons, and just let the pew-pewing go. When you win or lose, you'll be able to buy permanent upgrades, and there'll be multiple characters. The main issue with this one, like with a lot of the bullet heavens we've played, is how it's going to stand out or do anything different from a gameplay perspective. And this one does play, again, very similar to that of Vampire Survivors, just in terms of auto-aiming and running around watching things go boom. But if you are a fan of bullet heavens and looking for yet another example of it, I would at least give the demo a shot. We now have the Third Shift. This is a survival horror game meant to be kind of an emulated off of the original Game Boy. You have come to the Roanoke Museum in order to be a security guard, no questions asked, and unfortunately for you, your shift is going to be very weird. Strange things are happening, and if you're going to make it to the end and get your paycheck, you must solve this case and try and survive. So, as you can tell by the aesthetics, we are aiming right for the Game Boy, and it does do a lot in terms of building this tension as to where somebody's going to come from and what kind of things the game is going to do to scare you. I do have a few issues. The onboarding and just general UI are a little bit on the frustrating side. There was nothing in game to even let me know what the controls were, and they put the kind of menus and control scheme on the store page, which I didn't notice until after we finished our play. So I don't know if there is a in-game map or mapping functionality. For those of you who have played this, please let me know if they do have that here. You see, if it doesn't have that, then it can be a little annoying to navigate. This is one of those games where you can leave a room going out the right-hand side, go into another room facing north, leave that room to the west, and come out facing south. So it can be very confusing in that respect. And not knowing about the menu also meant it was a little hard to know how much my stamina was and why I kept running out of it. But the game looks like it's going to be a very interesting take on its design, as it will shift between first, second, and kind of third-person views for different sections, such as when you have to investigate specific rooms, looking for items, puzzle solving, and so on. So, if you don't mind the retro graphics and looking for some very bite-sized horror, I would at least give this one a check. We now have Amedama, which I may be butchering that pronunciation. This is a kind of side-scrolling action-adventure game. When our mute sister has been kidnapped and we are slain in a Japanese village, we discover that we are now a displaced soul. And in order to solve the mystery as to what's going on, we must explore, take over bodies, and try and learn the mysteries of why this is happening. The game's structure is that you're playing the same 7 days over and over again, but you're able to make different decisions, interact with different people, go different areas, in order to learn more about the overall world and the situation. As you explore, you'll be able to possess people who you've either defeated or are on the verge of death, with each character type having access to different attacks, different stats, and so on. And yes, that means you can actually possess a boss or elite character once you beat them up. Now, the combat itself is just okay. It is on the basic side. For one thing, you're able to parry after any block, do your super strong parry attack immediately, and either that is a bug or that is incredibly overpowered. And I don't know how they're going to balance this game for the finished version. If it will be more lenient to allow people to focus on the story, or will there be additional difficulty options or settings for people who want that? There is a lot of potential here. Unfortunately, the demo didn't let us see all the way through the end. There's a lot of cutscenes you have to go through, so I didn't get a chance to see how the 7-day rewind structure is going to work in this one. But there is certainly a lot of potential here for fans, especially if you enjoy the likes of Way of the Samurai. So if you're looking for some slicing samurai storytelling, then you should check this one out. We now turn to Aureole Wings of Hope. And this is a quite unusual platformer. It reminds me a little bit of some of the Kirby games I played on the DS. But we play as a pair of angels who are trying to get back to heaven and save the day. But unfortunately, we can only move by flinging our halo around and using it for platforming shenanigans. The tech here is that you can use your halo to launch in any direction. You can launch twice in the air before you must land in order to recharge it. You can also hit left trigger to do a sonic speed dash when you're on the ground, or merely drop down from the air if you're doing it in the air like that. Levels will have collectibles, and you'll be of course graded on how quickly you get through things. The level design here is very varied, and there is a lot going on in terms of obstacle design, enemies, and so on. I do not know if there will be any quote-unquote boss fights or things like that in the finished game. The demo did not go that far, but there is certainly a lot of humor and a lot of challenging platforming to be had. If you're playing this on the higher difficulty, there are fewer checkpoints. If I had any issues with it, I would have really appreciated a kind of target prediction line, so I can see where the halo is going to end up. There's a lot of sections where you need to move incredibly fast, and you need to time your jumps or your launches properly, or you are in trouble. But there is some very interesting design here. While it certainly does not play like any other platformer we've seen, at least here on the PC, if you're looking for one that has a lot of humor, and it's going to challenge you in ways that we haven't seen like a traditional indie platformer, then you should definitely check this one out. We now turn to Sentry, which is a kind of roguelike shooter tower defense. Think of this as if we combine Doom with Orcs Must Die. You must defend a spaceship from invading aliens. Their pathing and where they're going to come from changes each time you play. Similar to Orcs Must Die, you'll begin each run deciding what weapons, deployables, and items you will bring in. This will be anything from different guns, shotgun, assault rifle, and that kind of thing. And then traps, slowdowns, turrets, grenades, and so on. You need to defend against each wave as different aliens will come moving in. As the waves escalate, they'll start attacking from multiple paths at the same time. You'll need to use the environment as well as whatever weapons and tools you bring in order to stem the tide. Now, you're not going to see in the footage we were showing, but this game also features multiplayer, as you'll be able to team up with friends in order to deal with the various aliens. I really like this as a concept, especially the kind of destructibility and the use of the environment. It does feel like if you're playing the single player that you must bring some of the turrets to help you, as otherwise you are just one gun. And the tiles and other traps you can bring don't seem to do enough of a job. If I had any complaint about this game, is that the gunplay just felt okay. It didn't seem like there was locational damage, other than for the very specific aliens, and the guns are just simple pew-pew kind of things. But there is certainly a lot of potential here for someone who likes the kind of mix between action and tower defense style gameplay, and they can nail that feel. This could be a very solid game to either team up or take things on solo with. For our next tower defense game, this is nothing like our previous one. This is Anx Defense. And what we have here is a kind of puzzle take on the tower defense formula. Instead of you building multiple towers of different types in order to deal with enemies, you have one tower which you must modify and adjust the bullets and its properties in order to defend against waves of enemies. Your orb shoots out a glimmer, which is your projectile. You can use basic mirrors to reflect that shot around to cover more paths, but the real thing is that as the glimmers pass across different buildings that you set up, it will change the properties of it. You place an attack up building, if it passes over it will gain more attack. However, you need to spend mana, blue and orange, at least in the demo, in order to pay for those upgrades. And there's different buildings you'll get access to that will give you more benefits, but you need to balance that with how the bullets are going to move around. As again, you are only dealing with one tower. Now, you are free to move things around however you see fit after each wave. And the game is definitely, again, positioned as more of a puzzle game first, tower defense second, as you're always given an indication as to how many enemies are coming, how much their health is, fixed elements in terms of the cost of elements as well. And as the game goes on, you'll also have to balance this with buying your various towers, crystals, and buildings, and this will have to be balanced with the farms that you can build up. So there is a very careful balance in terms of how much you can do on a wave-by-wave basis, saving up and pulling your money to make essential upgrades, and trying to stay one step ahead of the enemy waves. I enjoyed this one, but it is definitely a different take on tower defense. And if you're used to mazing, pathing, and just setting up entire killing floors of towers, this one is probably not going to be it for you. But if you enjoy the methodical nature of solving a puzzle, and this time you're doing that with the power of towers, then I highly recommend checking this one out. We now turn to Pine Harbor. If Tormented Souls was an indie take on the traditional survival horror third-person perspective, then this is our indie take on the first-person Resident Evil 7 style. You have come to the town of Pine Harbor, something strange is going on, and there's going to be a lot of strange monsters who are going to be out to get you. The demo itself takes place in this kind of like amnesia-looking environment, but you are certainly armed, unlike in those games, or should I say the older ones. From our time the demo, it is going to be presenting a very interesting mix of kind of the light puzzle-solving adventure gameplay with shooting, boom boom, and trying to stay one step ahead of the monsters trying to get you. Now, one polarizing element from this demo, which I cannot confirm if it's going to be in the main game or not, is with the nature of respawning enemies. You see, in the demo that we played, anytime we ran or going into specific rooms would trigger the spawning of enemies. Sometimes it would just spawn like one enemy behind us. Other times it could all of a sudden we get hit with like 2 or 3 enemies running full steam down the hallway to get us. And I'm not a fan of kind of the enemies spawning in. The developers said on the forum that it could have been a bug that was in the demo, but I cannot confirm 100% on that front. Now, with the game using kind of the ultra-realistic aesthetic of using the Unreal Engine, it also means that some of the key items are a little hard to kind of differentiate from the rest of this environment. And it can be very easy to miss something important just by virtue that everything looks the same. And I hope they do put some kind of like a glow or some kind of notification when something can actually be interacted with. With that said, however, the gunplay is on point as, again, this kind of Resident Evil 7 slower FPS style game, and there could be some potential here for survival horror fans looking for a little bit more shooting in their life. But that is going to do it for part 4 of our Next Fest coverage. We're about, I believe, halfway done now, so be sure to come back tomorrow for even more indie game recommendations that you can enjoy checking out. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.